off top, the oldest person known to serve as a professional head coach was Ivor Powell for University of Bath. He retired in 2010. 93 years old. Play the music.
This is the Domonique Foxworth Show.
Welcome to the Domonique Foxworth Show, presented by Domonique Foxworth only. Not at all presented by Charlie Kravitz and his beautiful curls. But we are joined today by the great old friend we haven't seen in a while, Mike Golic Jr., the king of the podcast, or the man with the king on his podcast. Hey, Gojo.
How you doing? Yeah, no, I was waiting for my curly locks review here. Charlie's kind of got the haircut that I feel like the young kids have now, like the Patrick Mahomes sort of look.
Oh.
You know, I think the broccoli hair coming into style has really benefited me. I waited 35 years to have a haircut that became popular.
I will say, Charlie's winning the hair game, but the beard game, no match. Gojo killing him the beards.
Dude, one of my college friends, his wife sent a picture of the two of us back from when we were in college, and it's one of the very few pictures that exists with me without any hair on my face, and it was a very haunting reminder of why I will be 6 feet deep, and I'm still going to have something on my face, because what's going on down here, this multi-generational double chin, cannot be freed to the public.
I mean, are you above a little bit of plastic surgery? Hook it up, man. You're a sex symbol. You can't just...
I don't want to get roasted. That's my thing has always been with the idea of, like, hair plugs, too, is at this point, if I went, like, you know, not to disparage him, but like the Urlacher route where he got paid and got the patty back on top of his head, I feel like that would not be worth the roasting and ridicule that I would receive from people close to me, and rightly so.
I mean, I guess so. The fact that you are concerned about it suggests that you shouldn't do it. Because, I mean, I've considered addressing my corners in the free agency market, but I haven't done it yet. I'm not above it. I would not be ashamed. I think my man Van Lathan just got his hair plugs, and you got to lean into it. Let him know, like Deion Sanders did it. Let him know I'm doing these hair plugs, and y'all ain't going to judge me. But, I mean, you're fine. You don't need it. I just was throwing it out there.
I also drew the line in the sand too long ago. Like right now, you're still playing with a pretty luscious fairway here. And so if you do it right now at the right time, can absolutely work. I mistimed the jump on that. And so now here I am learning how to shave my head better and better with each passing week.
Honestly, though, if you and LeBron did it together, that's a podcast.
Ooh. I mean, LeBron doesn't need it. His hair still grows.
Okay. Sure it does.
All right. Well, speaking of someone whose hair doesn't need any help, actually it does. Like the blonde dye, I could do without that, Joe Burrow.
It's kind of back out now, though. It looks normal again.
Yeah. I mean, Joe, I think that might have been the reason why this season has been so rough. But Joe Burrow.
That's it.
Yeah, that was it. The defense couldn't focus. That's why. I mean, actually, he's playing as well as he's ever played. Yeah. So some could argue that the Slim Shady helped him reach his peak. But currently, Joe Burrow is out here doing sacrilegious things as far as I'm concerned, openly talking about restructuring his contract in order to help the team sign players. We don't do that. We don't do that around here. Don't come messing with our money. To be honest with you, though, Joe Burrow is it's kind of a bit of a trick. Because I get what he's saying. He's not saying – he said restructure, right?
Restructure to get –
Charlie?
Yeah, to fit in T. Higgins. There had also been the report that from Patriots beat reporters that the Patriots are going to offer T. Higgins the moon. And this has been a season that's made it pretty clear statistically that when you have Chase and Higgins on the field together with Joe Burrow, their offense is a top 3, top 2, top whatever unit. Building that way. So, yeah, Joe Burrow wants to keep the band together. I mean, they haven't signed Chase yet. They have to sign both of them.
Yeah. So I think there's a few different – oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go, Joe.
No, I was just going to say that's really – I think as we talk about this too, that's probably the most important bit of background is the Bengals didn't do themselves any favors by not getting the Chase deal done last summer. Yeah. Especially now considering the season he's had. I mean, Jesus Christ, the Brinks truck just keeps getting bigger.
It's a conversation we have on this show all the time that seems so obvious is quarterback, anything, like as soon as it's possible to pay your guy, pay your guy. And I know that the Bengals fall in this unique financial situation where it feels like they don't have the money to put in escrow to make sure that they lock up their guys. Like they had to sell the naming rights for the first time in order to secure Joe Burrow. But there's a couple different ways that I want this conversation to go. One of them is we talk about like the idea of building this team around Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, and Chase, because I think most reasonable people would suggest that you should move on from T. Higgins because of all the other holes that you see out there. But the other places where I want to start, I thought about this when I was walking over, is when I'm reading through this document to prepare for the show, I kept seeing restructure. And you know what restructure is? Not taking a pay cut. Restructure is moving your cap hit. And so you know how you move your cap hit? It's by getting more guaranteed money. Or getting more bonus money. So Joe Burrow out here faking like he's going to take a pay cut when he's really just going to take some of the back-end guarantees or some of the back-end unguaranteed stuff and say, you know what? I don't have to wait for that. We can lower my cap number by turning this more into guaranteed bonus and spread it out over the course of this contract. So I take back any disparaging words that I had about Joe Burrow at first. He gave me the system. I see you, baby. Get what you want and some money on top.
And say that's always the world of the haves in the NFL that obviously I never even got close to. You got to, touch there briefly and enjoy, but like being around with enough guaranteed money on your contract to where you're the guy they come to when they need to smooth these things out here. And getting to do that and be in that spot right now means Joe Burrow gets to go out here and sound real charitable when he's talking to the media. But I guess then the question on the other side of that becomes like, is that the smart way to do this? If you're the Bengals, like to Charlie's point, yes, with these guys, you have been one of the best offenses. You are arguably the best passing offense in the NFL this year. You are the total opposite side of the Penei Sewell, Jamar Chase meme that has existed since their draft and will exist as long as I draw air in my lungs. And it's not like they haven't tried to address offensive line and other things, but the defense has now become enough of a problem, and you have clearly not displayed an aptitude for drafting defensive talent on that side of the ball to develop. And so now do you need to go out and spend opposite Trey Hendrickson on other guys because you've proven you can't draft at that side of the ball and have success?
So I think this is really interesting, but before we get into the build part of it, I did have a tiny bit of a different read on Burrow's comments, and I would love to know what you guys think about this, because this is what I read it as is we have cheap ownership that I don't want to be cheap, so I can publicly put pressure on it, being like, I can move money around. How much of that do you think is him flexing his power within the organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a possibility also. I think the most important part, though, is he ain't giving nothing back. That's all I care about. I think there's a difference between cheap and broke, too.
This is a very different thing.
You know what I mean? It's like, I think, and I know saying that someone who owns an NFL franchise being broke is ridiculous, but relative to other franchises, like if they don't got the money, they don't got the money. They can sell more pieces of their franchise to get the money, but if they don't got it, they don't got it. There's a difference. So you can put all the pressure you want on somebody who's broke. They got the money, they can't get the money. So I do think, however, that the financial situation, no matter what Joe Burrow does with his contract, it is going to limit the decisions that they can make around them if they go the T. Higgins way. And I know we talked about earlier the old school Colts teams with Reggie and Marv, and like Reggie didn't get number one receiver money, but they cut corners elsewhere. And I ran into Jeff Saturday earlier. I spent a bunch of time with Jeff Saturday earlier today, so I was just talking to him about it, and he pointed out how they had good linebackers, but they didn't pay them going forward. And they didn't spend money on corners, and Bob Sanders, the safety, wasn't there for long. Like, they had to make some decisions on where they invested their money. And part of the reason why I think they were successful, because the offense was still so good. And I'd be surprised if, Dallas Clark came up. They had to pay him also. But the league has changed some now. And the percentage of the cap that a receiver takes up is so much more than a percentage of the cap that he took up in the past. So paying two receivers really hamstrings is the wrong word, but it really, really decides for you the type of team that you have to be. And you have to hope that you get lucky in the draft. And that's the problem, is they haven't been good in the draft. So I get hesitant. Generally, I think I'm a little risk averse when it comes to moving on from players that you have that are good. But in this case, I would suggest that they move on because it gives them more flexibility, but there's no guarantee that they'll ever be as good as they have been since they had this Chase Higgins Burrow combo.
Well, isn't that also part of the calculus around quarterbacks that we consider Joe Burrow in the tier of? Like, we watched Mahomes do this a few years ago when they moved on from Tyreek Hill. We're in the process of watching Josh Allen do it right now. Lamar Jackson's always been someone that really, until recently, has been dealing with receivers that we would consider below what a lot of his peers have worked with. And so I think that is part of the bet you make. Listen, you're still going to re-sign Jamar Chase. You're going to have one of the best receivers in the NFL. Andre Yoshivas has shown some flashes this year. You brought in Mike Gesicki at tight end. Like, there are going to be other places to put the football, and you're still going to have more than most. But it's also, all right, we paid the quarterback all this money. He is one of the special players. We should be able to let one great wide receiver go and be able to survive that.
Right. And I think there's an interesting thing here, too, of how you evaluate these wide receivers, too. It's like, I've seen this online, so whoever's tweet I'm stealing, I'm sorry. I can't remember the name of it. But that Chase is a guy that's a $30 million receiver that you're delighted to pay $35 million a year. And T. Higgins is a guy who's a $30 million wide receiver who you're sort of pants paying him $30 million a year. And that's an interesting distinction of how you do this build. And Domonique, to your point, the Colts thing, this is a really, where they're headed now is very interesting territory with those Colts offenses where they're stacking years of being this really explosive passing game and having units that don't quite measure up. Because if Burrow's going to enter Peyton Manning territory, that also means elevating receivers. That means making his version of a Julius Thomas one of the best tight ends in the NFL for a year. That means taking the Brandon Stokley's or the, other slot receivers and turning them into 1,100-yard guys. And that evolution, if you can build around them, that's when it becomes pretty interesting for an organizational build.
Yeah, and I think the point that they have with Chase, like a true number one, maybe the best, arguably the best receiver in football, you should be able to build out around that. But I think the problem with this team is, and we say this about quarterbacks often, is how they're supposed to elevate their team. And, that always kind of rubs me the wrong way. I get it. I understand it. But in all these situations where we talk about quarterbacks who do elevate their teams, they getting help. Like, it's not as if they aren't, like, there's not a good running attack in Buffalo. It's not as if Mark Andrews hasn't been there the whole time for Lamar. Like, they're getting help. So Chase is a nice option, or some teams have, like, a good offensive line. So the huge challenge, I think, for this team is actually hitting on the draft. And what we talk about often with Super Bowl teams, like, it's been kind of a trope for a while, is like you win your Super Bowl with a quarterback on a rookie deal. I honestly think you win the Super Bowl with a quarterback on a rookie deal because they're so valuable, but you really have to have a number of good players on a rookie deal. Like, you got to hit somewhere. If you have just a quarterback, then that's enough to, like, pay a bunch of other players because quarterbacks are so valuable. But none of these teams, if you think about Super Bowl champions recently, all of those teams have really high level contributing, like, great players who are still on their rookie deal. So they are never going to win a championship until they start hitting in the draft more than Chase and Burrow. Like, that's Chase, Burrow, and Higgins. I don't know who else they hit the draft. Trey Hendrickson is it. That's it.
Well, I mean, Trey Hendrickson they brought over from New Orleans.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Like, I went back and looked. Their last three draft classes, when you look at their top end picks, they drafted a D tackle named Zach Carter, who they cut. Cam Taylor-Britt has shown flashes, but was also briefly benched this season.
Benched,
Dak Hill tore his ACL earlier this year. The 2023 class, you had Yoshivas, who's shown up, Chase Brown, who's shown up this year, Jordan Battle, who's played like a quarter of the defensive snaps, DJ Turner, unfortunately, that fractured ankle, Miles Murphy, their first-round pick so far, looks like he's not quite lived up to the billing. And then this year, you've got a bunch of defensive linemen that really haven't cracked the lineup in a meaningful way yet, a wide receiver that was a healthy DNP one game because people thought he was in a casino, and then Amarius Mims, who's been out there and played a bunch there. I mean, it hasn't improved everything a ton, but he's at least been out there and you've been getting snaps out of your pick. So that right there, I mean, in 3 years, you haven't landed a ton of impact starters in the early rounds of the draft.
This is this is really interesting because this is I remember when we started this podcast 2 years ago, Domonique, you had a theory about how having two wide receivers was going to be the future of offensive development, and a lot of that's changed in certain ways because your theory at the time was there's so many good receivers coming into the draft. You need to keep trying to hit on those guys. And that's something for the Bengals to think about. But Gojo, as you brought that up, the story of this season has been offensive and defensive lines with these good teams. When you look at the Eagles, the Lions, the Steelers, where the Chiefs have struggled, and then you look at this Bengals team, Joe Burrow, keeping him upright was the whole basis of this Sewell debate, and dominating the trenches is like what this team hasn't really done in several years, and might be the heart of this rebuild or starting again.
The story of almost every season is winning in the trenches. We like to tell a story about the quarterbacks, but as you know, Charlie, I often tell you, offensive line is where I start when I'm picking my Super Bowl champs. And if you can't win in the trenches, I don't know when to stop this whispering bit.
You can stop now.
I think it's run its course right now. Okay.
It was a good bit though, but we can be loud and use our chest when we talk about your pride in the offensive line. It's one of the things I love most about you, Domonique, is you're one of the ones beating the drum at the beginning of the season. Say I start with that as the foundation, and it is true. Like I looked earlier this year, and it's one of those things where I understand we do this, in the past, like the 100-yard rushing statistics, we've obviously shown, hey, teams are more likely to go over 100 yards when you're closing out games. Like we know that's not necessarily the correlation causation thing to winning, but you look at the teams right now in terms of run pass ratio that are dominating in the NFL, and you see it borne out in real time. People are leaning on the run a lot more. Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Green Bay, Baltimore, Detroit, Washington, Buffalo, all teams in the top 10 in terms of run-to-pass ratio in favor of run. And there's the Cincinnati Bengals sitting right there with the Dallas Cowboys, the Las Vegas Raiders, and the Cleveland Browns in terms of being a more pass-heavy offense than they can sustain right now. Like, it all goes back to the point, and this is the Eagles discussion we'll have in a little bit too, is you got to be able to do multiple things if you're going to be a team that actually wins come January and February. And that's not a thing that the Bengals have ever really figured out meaningfully.
Yeah, I think we've exhausted the Bengals conversation. You gave us the segue to the Eagles. I think I want to get there as soon as possible.
Your show, do it
Charlie,
now.
how you want to Yeah. I was going to say, I didn't know how exactly you wanted to set up this conversation. Like, I know it's going to be about Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown's issue, but at some point we'll get to the bigger picture about this team's future. Oh, yeah, and Brandon Graham, can we play the audio?
The person that's complaining need to be accountable. And I'm just being honest. You know what I'm saying? Like, and he noticed. I don't know the whole story, but I know that one is trying. And, 11 could be a little better with how he respond to things, and they was friends before this. It's like, man, but things have changed, and I understand that because life happens. But it's the business side that we have to make sure that we don't let the personal get in the way of the business, and that's what we got to do better as right now.
Listeners, you have now just heard Brandon Graham talk about how A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts, they were friends, but things have changed. We can get into the numbers of it and how A.J. Brown has been used as like the 28th highest target rate in the NFL. But how big of a deal is this? The personal relationships, the use of it. This is a team that keeps winning, is awesome. We think it's one of the best teams in the NFL, but this is a huge story now.
I think it's a story because the production is also hitting the spot that it's in right now. Like, I'm generally of the ilk where, hey, football locker rooms are so big, not everyone is going to always like each other. Now, we have the background of knowing that Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown have had a relationship since high school. Jalen Hurts is the godfather of A.J. Brown's daughter. Like, all this stuff that pops up that lets us know they're more than just teammates and guys that share a locker room and then leave the facility there. But at the same time, I play with plenty of guys that can't stand each other, and the whole thing is, hey, I just need you to respect each other enough to when we come into work, we get the job done and we can go out here and ball. And the minute it starts affecting it, and I have a feeling the reason why Brandon Graham felt it in his soul to bring it up in this spot, even if it's ill-advised, was because he sees it starting to mess with everybody's cash right now. And whatever you do away from the field is your business. Just don't bring it in here. But if you start bringing it in the locker room, now it becomes everyone's problem, whatever's going on in their life. I don't really care.
Yeah, I hear you saying that, Gojo, and it took me, so this morning we talked about it a bunch on the morning shows, and it wasn't until First Take when I heard it for like the 5th or 6th time that it kind of resonated with me that even though A.J. Brown's comment was about passing, Brandon Graham's comments was about their personal relationship. And that to me, so like much of the morning I was giving out some bad takes because I didn't hear this right. Like I gave Greeny my takes, and now I've developed those takes to the point now where the best takes are where they belong on the Domonique Foxworth Show. But so I put all the stuff about A.J. Brown being a selfish receiver, I throw that out of my head. It's not something that I accept because that's like the first reaction is it's like, no. A.J. Brown, when they signed Saquon, was like, I'm going to make sure that he get his. Like, A.J. Brown is not that guy. And even when you watch him play, even when he's not getting the ball, he's playing hard. He's working his off. So this isn't about the ego monster stuff that we sometimes associate with receivers. And honestly, like, I came to this when I was looking for a way to defend A.J. Brown earlier today. I pointed out how in a win, you want guys who are looking to get better. And the tough thing about being a receiver is the only way you can really impact the team is catching the ball. So if you're saying, I want to catch the ball, it's always taken as I want to be the reason. But in this particular case, it could be construed as like, I want to help. We aren't as good as we should be. And the way that we get better is by getting better at passing the ball. So we can put all that aside because of what Brandon Graham said. Feels personal, and that to me feels a little bit more concerning. I don't know what happened, and Brandon saying one is trying, because I interpreted one is trying as like Hurts is trying to throw the ball better. It feels like one is trying, and we need to be careful about like speculating, but it feels like one is trying to mend this relationship.
That was my question.
That's how I took it.
Yeah, I genuinely don't know if this was one's not throwing to 11, then there's a falling out, or there's a falling out and now one's not throwing to 11. Like the order of operations here is very interesting.
Well, and for Brandon Graham to say one is trying would indicate to me that, hey, you know what? Jalen Hurts also not dumb enough to subvert team success by not throwing to the best receiver on the team. Like, I also want to give them the credit of being professionals. To Dominique's point, you've seen A.J. Brown out there still working hard. I believe Jalen Hurts wants to win, but it's what we always hear. Like, what do you hear? Like every college locker room when a guy comes in, he's like, oh yeah, I room with the quarterback because I want to get balls thrown my way type thing. If Jalen Hurts is the one trying to mend this relationship, according to Brandon Graham, I'd imagine he'd be inclined to throw him the ball whenever possible. Like, that also does seem like the fix to this of, hey, just target A.J. Brown a ton at the beginning of the next game and let's start to mend fences some. But if he is the one trying, you'd assume that would also include throw the guy who's very good at catching the ball.
The tough thing about this, though, is if it is interpersonal stuff, we don't know what ignited it.
Right.
We don't know how to solve it. We can't speculate about any of those things. I can talk about times when I've been on teams where there were beef, and that would be like, assuming that this is the same situation, I'd be surprised by that, and that'd be probably irresponsible. But I will say this about what?
No, it's where all beef comes from. Go continue on.
Yeah. I mean, I don't gotta explain it. Everybody knows. Like,
it made me giggle. That's it.
Hey, men are not that complicated, guys. So like,
It
it's a couple
giggle,
things.
and he's really handsome. Like it's part of the situation. Carry on.
I mean, they're both really attractive guys.
By the way, the Eagles might be an all-time just handsome team in general once they added Saquon too.
Translucent helmets for the backfield. Been calling for it all year.
What about
it needs to be like the underside of one of those tour ships, just totally see-through.
Exactly.
So, couple of things, a lot of things. One, the most attractive position in football is important for us to address at some point. I'm sure Charlie has a ranking because he has a ranking of everything. Two, men are very simple. I tell people this sometimes is that like I grew up just me and my brother and like never really had like a serious relationship until I got to college, and I believe that there was only 3 emotions. It was like happy, mad, sad. It wasn't until I got to college that I was like, there's some new stuff. Oh, there's some combinations. When I had a girlfriend that I actually had to care about what she thought, I was like, huh? So you're not mad at me? You're not happy? You're not crying. What is this feeling? So I think that most guys are like me. Very simple. Why are you laughing, Charlie?
I'm just laughing at the fact that you were so good at football, you never thought once about having anxiety or stress as an emotion until you got to college.
No, he only dealt with the boy emotions like sprinting and rage.
Happy, sad, mad. That's it. Nothing else. I'm fast. I'm going to go wherever I want.
I want to see
that's
Dominique's version in college of Inside Out. Like, I want to see those emotions pulling the strings for young Domonique Foxworth.
It was real simple. Yeah, the Inside Out in my head will be two meatheads and one really horny guy. That's it. But I mean, that's all me in high school. It's like two meatheads and one guy that's like, but girls no. I forgot where I was going with any of this, but this was a good enough place. I mean, I think I know what I wanted to say is like if there's some relationship stuff that is causing Jalen Hurts to not throw A.J. Brown the ball, that's absurd. That sounds like Tom Brady. And you know what Tom Brady is that Jalen Hurts ain't? Great at playing quarterback. Yeah. Tom Brady can afford, like Jalen Hurts at this point in his career, no disrespect, Jalen, but you need A.J. Brown. You can't be afforded to teach nobody no damn lessons. You better throw that thing over there whether he's covered or not, because as you know, A.J. Brown ain't never covered. He'll go catch it.
I do think it's one of these things, too, where I wonder, the relationship to me, like when the relationship and the interpersonal stuff gets brought up, it's less so in my mind, oh, is he throwing the ball a bunch? Because the nature of their offense is not that. Like we can talk about the way, again, to Charlie's point, how the Eagles have decided they want to live knowing, hey, the O-line is an absolute mass of humanity. Saquon Barkley is finally unlocked to his full potential. And we can win a lot of games against defenses that are just ill-equipped across the NFL right now, by and large, to handle a lot of this. But my worry is the day-to-day stuff, the week-to-week stuff, because you know how much extra communication is required between quarterback and receiver. We hear about it all the time from these guys. The relationship between Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp, that Puka Nacua, when he came to that organization, said, I was just kind of sitting on the side watching the way that they would do work. They were like a married couple. That's sort of what is required between those positions to have super high-end success. And so if that stuff suffers as a part of this in the preparation, then I think that's what stunts you when it's come time to try and go out and use that as a part of a game plan when you got to win when people take away the run.
And this is something too where it's to your point, it's just a cap on how good the offense can be. And like, look, A.J. Brown has always been a player that has been forced to be more efficient than some of his peers as receivers at the top of the league. He came from an Arthur Smith offense in Tennessee with Tannehill. That's actually a really good comp for how Jalen Hurts plays. Like they're very similar players. Tannehill was a little bit more polished by the time he sort of exploded with that A.J. Brown offense. But you traded a first and a third round pick for this guy. He's one of the elite receivers in football, and you shouldn't be limited to being so run heavy when you have these weapons, when you have Devontae Smith, when you have Dallas Goedert, when you have A.J. Brown. Like all the pieces are in place for this to be a much more explosive passing game and to not be in a position like they were last week where it seems like we can't sort of have a different way to beat this Panthers team. We can't explode and just put them away and go up by 17 points. And that's something that's legitimately left on the table if they're going to use Jalen Hurts like a poor man's Ryan Tannehill.
Yeah, I mean, the simplicity of the offense is what jumps out to me. Of good teams, you see there is some like surprising complex route combination. This team doesn't do that. They run the classic where we have better players offense, where it's like, look, we're not going to do nothing crazy. We have better players. We talked about the guard position for them a while ago. We didn't have Gojo, but I just want to bring this up for Gojo. Like, why doesn't everybody get a bunch of tackle-sized humans and put them at guard? Because essentially this offensive line is like a small athletic center and then a bunch of tackles, right? Like it's 6'7" at guard, at both guards 6'7", and then they got Lane and Milo.
Dickerson's not 6'7", is he? Landon Dickerson was an interior lineman. He was a center at Florida State and at Alabama.
I know he was an interior lineman, but he is not the size of an interior lineman.
Oh, yeah.
He is.
No, he's 6'7".
He's
right?
Officially listed at 6'6", maybe a hair over 6'6".
Jesus Christ, Landon's that tall?
Yeah, 333 pounds.
God.
Also, he has the tackle hands. He has the 10.5-inch hands and the long arms.
Sorry, AJ. We're just going to get behind these guys while everyone else has 250-pound D tackles to rush the passers and 220-pound linebackers to cover. We're just going to get behind these big, mean guys and run it.
Dude, it is the most macro version of the whole argument we can have about like T. Higgins and all that stuff is like, you draft rare body types, and there are no more rare body types than the ones you find along the offensive lines, especially on the higher end of this stuff. It's why people are obsessed with hand size and all that stuff, because the other part of it with them, too, that's unfair to everyone else is you can do that. I mean, Amarius Mims, one of the best-looking physical specimens on earth. Jeff Stoutland does not live there. And so that's the difference is when you've got guys like that, Jordan Mailata, who didn't play football, Mekhi Becton, who's a reclamation project and was a first-round pick for another organization, they don't have someone that can coach like Jeff Stoutland can coach. He's one of the kingmakers. That's why I saw it was Jory Epstein, I think, over at Yahoo Sports, who talked about Hank Fraley, the offensive line coach for the Detroit Lions, being someone that people looked at for potential offensive coordinator jobs, because I'd want that guy in my building influencing my young beef if I've got anyone that's got aspirations of improving that area. Like, you got to go find. There are only a handful of O-line coaches that are true difference makers like that, and Detroit's got one of them, but so does this Philadelphia team.
Can I use that? I need to use that from here on out. My young beef is good O-line stuff. I was just thinking, as anytime we talk about this team, at some point we get to the fact that Lane Johnson is really big and scary, and we saw him at the Super Bowl once, and I'm realizing that you look like kind of a Bruce Banner to Lane Johnson's Hulk. You got a similar, like, it's the beard, the bald, the big white guy, but you're like, if there was, not that Lane Johnson would ever need to use any PEDs, but a couple of HGHs, a couple of rounds of HGHs of steroids, you're Lane Johnson, my friend.
He's just like 1.5 or 2x me. Like, Lane and I are the same age, too. We played against each other in college when my 5th year when we went down and played at Oklahoma. And, like, I'll see him at O-line masterminds in the summer, and he is. It's just him and Kyle Long are the super serum versions of me. We're all bald-bearded white guys. We're all cut from the same basic archetype. That's an interesting one, because I always said Kyle Long, I gave him the mantle as the archetype for the bald-bearded white guy because he's the biggest one I've ever met. But Lane Johnson's very close in that combo.
I don't know. Lane had a lot of diamonds on at the Super Bowl. That breaks character a little bit. A little too many diamonds to fall into that archetype.
Seeing Kyle Long throw a baseball and swing a baseball bat doesn't make sense for someone that size to have that type of dexterity and coordination.
Bro, watch him swing a golf club. It's disgusting. And he's a lefty.
Yeah.
Oh.
No, there is it's a joke.
That's what I always tell people. There's a difference. Like Lane, Kyle, there are athletes playing the offensive line position at the NFL. I was an offensive lineman from the moment I began Pee Wee football and never played another position. Like, I was not athletic enough to exist out in those spaces there. I was your true blue, hand in the dirt, you're going to stay there kind of offensive lineman.
This doesn't count for you because you played at Notre Dame and some NFL football, but Domonique has looked at me before knowing that I played center in high school and was like, that was last stop on the bus. Ending up as a guard. There was nowhere else to put you.
No.
That's the old Mark Schlereth line. The next stop on the rung on the position is fan after guard.
Yeah, but center, you're a little smarter. You know what I'm saying? It's like you're a little smarter. So
center's great, man. You got help everywhere. It's the best position. You're never singled up and alone. And when you are, it's scary as shit. That's why all the rule changes in the NFL, it should be illegal for Myles Garrett to line up and do basketball over the center. That's an abomination.
I remember when he did that. That does seem incredibly unfair. Speaking of unfair body types, Myles Garrett, incredible. All right, I want to get to some college stuff. Charlie, have you created a ranking of handsomest positions in football?
Well, you know, I think historically it would be quarterbacks, but I think wide receivers are giving them a run for the money. This
Racism.
It's now racism. Why? Wide receivers are number one now.
No, I just wanted it to get awkward for a second. That's all. We haven't had any awkward moments in a while.
I was giving T. Higgins and Steph Diggs their love finally to be number one receivers in this ranking.
T. Higgins, handsome dude. Steph, handsome. Do people think CeeDee Lamb is very handsome too?
Yeah.
Like
Yosavas, really handsome man.
Yeah. Hey, you gotta catch more balls to get in this, man. You gotta be great.
Puka Nakua's got that like sort of like long flowy hair handsome to him.
Yeah, Puka has. I could imagine that for people who Puka is their type, Puka's their type. But Puka doesn't strike me as universal. Everybody just turn on TV like, ooh, who's Puka? It's like,
well, I love like because in that backfield with Cooper Kupp, like Cooper Kupp's Amish sexy, and he's got the money haircut now.
He does have the money haircut, which is just pretty much a fade, right? It's like.
Well, but it's just like where you can tell someone went to a barber to groom their beard and line them up on the side and fade it all in there. Like, he's not just going and like picking a number off a wall anymore. He's got a guy.
Yeah, he's got a guy, or it might be a woman. Like, he's got someone who is routinely, like, every week he's getting hooked up, which is my life.
Yeah,
I see a lot of.
I would like to do a more detailed breakdown of the best looking position group, because we always do it by position or just in general. And I feel like it is time we stratify that a little more.
Well, this is a deep
flyest is obviously corner. Like always. The flyest position, corner. We work our way down to O-line, intentionally least fly.
I think backup
they find each other if you look too nice.
Yeah. Do you think backup quarterbacks have become more handsome than actual quarterbacks?
Really?
I think we might be going down that with like the Jimmy Garoppolos and Sam Hartmans of the world. See a lot of TikToks of people discovering Sam Hartman on the Commander sideline.
That's so I got I got complimented twice today, so I'm feeling pretty handsome right now. For guys, you don't get that too often, so just in random 2 times today, I got the compliment, so I'm feeling pretty handsome. But I will say, if you are so attractive that people see you on the sideline and say, "Who's that?" That's doing something. That is doing something. But I feel like the starter, like with Joe Burrow in, like obviously Jalen Hurts, who I think is the handsomest man in NFL generally, it's hard for the backups to come for that guy. The way people act about Jalen Hurts is a problem.
Dominique, you mentioned defensive backs being the most handsome, and this is just a brief aside in that because it made me think I wanted to talk with you about Cooper DeJean. Do you think that he gets like the Kirk Cousins treatment in the defensive room where like people want to put the chains on him and stuff is kind of the gimmick, or is he about it?
So I said corners are the flyest. I don't know about the handsomest. It's just like we generally like give the most like the best attitude, persona, outfit. Like generally you walk into the club, you're going to know where the corners are at. I would say
general swagger.
Yeah. I would say I've been following Cooper DeJean since he was a sophomore, I think. And I would say my guess is Cooper got his own chains. I don't think Cooper is a mascot in the way that Kirk Cousins is. I feel like at some point Cooper went to some camps, or it was just the prevalence of the internet and the players that Cooper looked up to. Yeah. I think you look at his Instagrams from back in the day, like his highlight tapes, they got a lot of bass in them. I'll say that. His highlight tapes got a lot of bass in them. It's more bass than guitar. So I think Cooper's completely comfortable in the DB room.
One of the things this is a question for you, Dominique, because I'm sure you guys both play with guys like this. When I go to Cooper DeJean's Instagram, I don't know if I've seen a pro who likes team issue gear more than Cooper DeJean. A lot of gray sweats from the Eagles with the number on it. A lot of Iowa sweats with the number on it and slides.
Yeah, I think that's in part because Cooper walks in and they don't know he's an athlete.
That's exactly
Cooper has
right.
to remind them, like, hey, I'm Cooper DeJean. Look at this. Look at that number 30. No, he's 32.
33.
No, is that,
33. And then he was
32 is
3 at
Blankenship.
Iowa. Yeah.
32 is Blankenship, who also is getting a lot of he's getting boosted because he ain't playing nearly as well as people are acting. Like it says exciting whites on those shirts. Exciting white, guys. Let's be clear. Cooper is balling. Reed. You drafting, White. You drafting.
Yeah. It's a little more barefoot right now than it is any sort of like richer, better wine. I don't know many other better white wine brands. I'm not that cultured, so I got lost in the metaphor.
I had no idea what barefoot you were talking about, but now I know it's like the Australian wine, right? Yeah.
I think isn't that one the official wine in the NFL? I don't know. Wine has the official NFL. Damn, they will sell anything.
Exactly right. So will we. If you want to sponsor us, we'll shill. So can we pivot to college for a second? Because I think the way that the playoff bore out was like very, very interesting with the seeding, and I don't know if we're any closer to coming up with a fair path for a national champion than we were before the 12-team playoff. But we have a year ago, Joe, and we can drill down on this. But what part of the playoff are you most looking forward to? What change is most exciting to you as we get to like high leverage game season?
First round home games by far. such a unique experience in this regard. It puts the weather into a bigger factor the way we see for the NFL in the postseason, far more than what we've gotten in college's playoff. And I mean, a subsect of that too is you also have the impact of injury being more noticeable. Like in the past, hey, if Carson Beck had an injury in Georgia and you got 40 days to get ready for the BCS title, you might be able to heal up in time to play for that. But now in a couple of weeks' time, even with the bye they got in the first round, that's a bigger factor. So I do think having the true like season-long war of attrition be a part of crowning a champions there. But the first round home games are going to be awesome. I'm trying to get out to South Bend for the Notre Dame one. Like it'll be really cool to see those environments with games of this magnitude.
What do you mean trying to get out? You don't got no kids, man. Ain't nothing. You got to try to get out. Get your on a plane. You are royalty up there. Get your on a plane. I'm sure you can get a ticket. Ain't no trying to get out there. Get out there. Was LeBron stopping you from getting there?
It's a fair point. No. We're gonna be good. We're gonna be good.
Oh, you were just trying to be humble. My bad. That's the lineman.
Yeah.
See, that's the difference between DBs and linemen. I ain't with this Millie mouth foolishness. I'm going. I can't wait to see Kendrick Lamar at the Super Bowl. Even though I ain't got no tickets yet, I'm gonna get them. I bet you that. Damn.
To Charlie's point though about how you find a better path for a champion, this sport it's pretty much impossible because of the depth and breadth of it. Like, but I will say the thing they need to change is natural seeding as opposed to what they did this year. You can't have, the 9th and 12th seeds occupy the 3rd and 4th seeds and get a bye here. Like, have them make the tournament automatically. You can have the top 5 highest ranked conference champions make it into the top 12 because I think more often than not they'll be there. This year is a little bit of an anomaly, but you can't have them seeded 1 through 4 and have, because now, I mean, Oregon's got a much tougher path than the 1 seed deserves in this. It just makes the rest of the math too funky.
Texas has a better draw than Oregon, despite having to play an extra game. And that's like people angling for that 5 seed, which we knew sort of going in last week that was going to be like the money spot, is really interesting. Also, we have 2 teams in the playoffs where this is like, not to do the overly sports cliche media stuff. This is like legacy games for James Franklin and Ryan Day, who every week now, it seems like, are told that they can't win big games. And if they get wiped out in the first round of the playoff, that's going to be a huge deal.
So many big games that they had just this season. But anyway, go Joe. You're more of an expert on this than me. So what do you think?
I think Ryan Day's in a really interesting and terrifying spot because this Tennessee team on the right day can beat a lot of people. Like, it's the boom or bust nature of Josh Heupel's offense when the quarterback, like outside of Hendon Hooker, we haven't seen a quarterback consistently put together the downfield passing attack in that offense. Nico looked like he might be doing it more at the beginning of the season than not, but they're capable of beating Ohio State, especially because, to the attrition point, Ohio State's had to put their best offensive lineman, who's a guard, out at left tackle. Their center from last year's in because the guy they brought from Alabama got hurt in practice at the end of the season. So they're vulnerable. Georgia's vulnerable for the reasons that we mentioned. But yeah, James Franklin and Ryan Day by far feeling the most stress. Although I think it's Ryan Day by a country mile in that, just because for Penn State, like, yes, you have fallen short of that, but you've still been very good. And they're not a team that's looked at as having every advantage around the sport to be a part of the elite. Most people look at Ohio State and say, no matter who's at the helm there, we're going to be able to recruit the best talent in the country. We have perennially been that way. And you've had enough failings against your chief rival to where people have gotten over that. Like, they got rich person problems right now. You can't beat the one team that we don't like, and we've got most proximity to our pain, that it puts you in this position now where if he gets bounced in the first round, like, would I recommend firing him? No, because he's won a ton of games against 99% of the college football population. But is Ohio State a place that I believe, based on how they view themselves, is absolutely wild enough to fire him if he loses this one? Hell yes.
That's interesting because I feel like I could formulate a pretty easy argument for firing Ryan Day, despite the fact that he's won a lot. And it's mainly just because that situation is so good that you deserve. There's no reason why you can't have a coach who elevates you. Like, I suspect that that's a job that would be easy to fill, an attractive job for any of the young, talented coaches. And I don't want to say didn't earn the job. I don't want to say that, but like,
born on third base, still on third base right now.
Yeah,
it's okay. That's the meme that's going around from Michigan fans.
Yes, that's
okay, yeah.
That's
like
been what they've used against them for a while.
He hasn't been so bad that he could ruin this great situation, and maybe you could argue that he's maintaining it isn't easy, which I agree with. But like, he's not an elevator like I think some other coaches might be.
I think the thing we have to talk about with Ohio State, too, after the last couple of years, although, listen, based on what happened with Kyle McCord this season, where he goes to Syracuse and they win 9 games in year 1 with Fran Brown, and he looks like a much different player, you might have to ask something about the nature of the offense. But my thought was going to be, hey, Will Howard was a very good quarterback, better 2 years ago, I think, at Kansas State than he was last year. And then going to this year at Ohio State, did not look like a quarterback that we're used to being at Ohio State, especially with C.J. Stroud as our most recent memory there. Ohio State's kind of had the Clemson thing where you've been so used to having great wide receivers and great quarterback play, like NFL caliber quarterback play there, that the minute that falls off below that level, things start to look a little weird. The wide receiver situation still been awesome there, but quarterback play the last couple of years has been inconsistent in critical moments for them.
Right. I was watching this team. It's hard not to just think about a tiny bit too. Like, was there any way to keep Quinn Ewers in the building? Not that he's not erratic of it in of itself,
sure.
But there had to have been. Stroud was projected as a top 5 pick going into what would have been Ewers' redshirt freshman year, and it's hard not to look at this team, which is probably the most talented team in college football, other than the quarterback position, and not imagine how they would be slinging it with Jeremiah Smith and their entire receiving corps if they had Ewers under center.
All right,
especially with Bill Belichick now creeping into this North Carolina conversation. If Ohio State did do this, they want Vrabel bad around there. I'll be curious what that press tour and that push starts to look like. I don't think Vrabel will go back there, but at the same time, all of the reasons that are popping up around Belichick and the changes in college and how it might be more amenable to this stuff would, in theory, apply to a guy in Mike Vrabel as well who comes from that level.
I'd be interested to see if they, I assume Belichick would bring a bunch of NFL coaches. And as I understand it, coaches still recruit in college. Would they ever split those jobs? Because I think that's the big roadblock for guys who don't want to go to college is I don't want to recruit, which means that in your offseason, you're running around. Charlie, look like I pressed the button.
Yes, we should talk about this really quick. We'll end with Bill Belichick, but there's you've been taping 20 shows, so you might not have seen this, but Bill Belichick has reportedly made his intentions clear that he wants to coach at UNC, and the deal is in their hands. He wrote a 400-page organizational Bible with structure, payment plans, staffing choices, including having 2 separate staffs: a coaching staff where his son will be the coach in waiting, and a recruiting staff with a sitting general manager for the program to help recruit and run the budget of that. He wants salary minimums for position by position and everything to make it happen. And he views that college and a pro version of this updated manual can function in different ways, because I assume that's because he's not getting the same level of power he wants in the pro jobs when he interviewed for Atlanta last year. But that's what's being reported. It's fascinating, because now in UNC's hands and their 13 trustees to see if they want to give, the greatest professional football coach of all time the coaching responsibility. And this is interesting because he's willing to pass off the GM stuff.
Yeah, he's going to pass it off to somebody that he chooses. So it's
is Ernie Adams down to move to Chapel Hill?
We're getting the band back together, the Heist group back together for one last job.
That's super interesting, because that will be precedent that'll be followed everywhere else, and those staffs will be separated, which I think makes the college situation a lot more attractive. And then we'll be talking about hiring coaches, and then there'll be a bidding war for recruiting coordinators and recruiting staffs, and college will be more pro than pro, which I guess it's getting close to it.
You do hear a lot of stories right now about recruits and just how hands-on the people in these GM roles are. It's the cat's fully out of the bag. We had the story about Alabama's GM making $800,000 a year or whatever it is in the new deal he just signed. But these guys are very dialed into this process. The structure now, especially at most of the big blue blood institutions, is pretty established and pretty the responsibility is pretty well distributed amongst all of these people who, remember, we used to see those pictures of Florida's team with twice as many analysts as they have players. Now it's just allocating a lot of those bodies, it seems like, to people to run a lot of the recruiting, a lot of the forecasting and scouting for the portal guys. So to your point, Domonique, it is a pretty clear rubric for this that's starting to emerge in a lot of these places.
How many games does Notre Dame have to win for it to be considered an impressive trip to the playoff? Right now, you guys have Indiana. You beat them. You go play Georgia. And then after that, you're looking at I guess, either Penn State or Boise.
Yeah,
right.
I think for Notre Dame, you've got to win the first round game. Like, you can't be losing to Indiana. I understand Kurt Signetti. I've Googled him. He's great. He's phenomenal. And I love that team. Like, I genuinely think it is a good matchup on field. But if you're Notre Dame, you have gotten to the playoff and you've had problems with Alabama, Ohio State. You've had trouble in the regular season with a team like Georgia when you did that home and home a few years ago. You can stomach that as a fan base. We are used to losing those games at a certain time here. But after the season you've had here, you can't go out and lose to Indiana, even if they are not your parents' Indiana. Because someone asked me, we don't have any animosity towards them because they've never been a football school in my lifetime. We do that with Purdue, the little brother stuff with them down there. That's our thing with them. We have no relationship with Indiana. But now all of a sudden, if they were to come into South Bend and win this game, that would be difficult to stomach.
I felt like there was a time when, like, early days of the first 4-team college football playoffs where there was conversation that Notre Dame needed to, like, start winning these games, like win a national championship. It doesn't feel like that pressure is around Notre Dame the same way it is around some of these other. Like, Notre Dame is being treated a lot like Penn State, the way we talk about Penn State, which is surprising to me, considering that they have been really good for a really long time. When do we get to the point where people are like, hey, guys, win a championship, or are you guys just happy with, like, the current state?
I think there is an understanding that even in this day and age where, hey, Notre Dame is playing ball in the NIL world, they've got they've got things set up to play ball in the ways that other people are. They are still not a program that deals with the freedom in terms of who they can go out and get that some of their counterparts in other places do. The academic restrictions, while it's a crutch, are very real around there. And so that's kind of ultimately still something they have to grapple with. And the history of Notre Dame football is ebbs and flows of loosening academic restrictions and the things around those in order to go out here and field teams that eventually do win championships. I mean, 1988 is a long time ago. The game and the sport have changed a lot. And so it still remains to be seen. They've got to go out there and prove that they can be expected to win. That being said, once Michigan did it last year, feels a lot more attainable now, because what Michigan did and how they did it last year, Notre Dame can do. Like, they can do that. Notre Dame's never going to do what 2021 Georgia did. They're never going to do what 2020 Alabama did, more than likely. Like, a lot of that stuff might still be away from them. They can do what 2023 Michigan did. And so once you saw that and the opportunity you've got this year with a field that lacks a truly transcendent team and a defense that's playing as well as Notre Dame's, anything's possible. Like, this is as good an opportunity as they have had to legitimately win a championship probably in my lifetime.
Yeah, you guys can find 30 nerds that can ball. Stop acting like it's impossible. It's out there. You can do it. Or you
just
can
a bunch of Luke Kuechly's.
Yeah, you can also lower the academic restrictions and still be a respected institution. Get out of here, high and mighty. I'm sorry. I love you. I hope you guys beat Indiana, and then I hope you play Georgia.
Listen, anything's possible. Can I just say, though, as like a fan who's been beaten
You're
down
too nice,
for a long
man.
time,
I can't even. I don't mean any of this. I was just trying to get you to not be nice, but it didn't work.
Bro, it's not possible. I'm so beaten down. I played on this team. You know how many people I disappointed with our performances when I wore that uniform? I can't expect anything because I didn't go out here and break any generational curses when it came to these results.
All you had to do was redirect. Charlie went to Vanderbilt and I went to Maryland, man. Like, we are not football powerhouses. You could have thrown it on me, but you're too nice to do that.
It's okay, Gojo. He does this to me all the time, too. He tries to gaslight me into being angry and defending the Commanders of the teams I like, and I just, whatever. I've been a loser forever. Keep going, buddy.
You guys have a delightfully toxic relationship.
Right. Oh, man. He's not a loser. He's a winner. As long as he's with me, we keep winning. It's another show. We got a winning streak going on these shows. We are winning on top of winning on top of winning. It's all about our teammates. Thank you, Gojo, for joining the team for this day. Hopefully we can do it again soon, buddy. And, he has a podcast. It's really good. It doesn't need any promotion because it's doing better than ours, isn't it? It's probably more popular than ours. We don't promote podcasts that are more popular than ours.
Gojo and Golic. Great podcast. Get it wherever you get your podcasts.
After you get ours.
Checks in the mail.
Bye. See ya. Thanks to Charlie, all the great producers. I love you, Podville, and Metalark. Thank you for letting us use your studio. You're the best. Bye.
This is the Domonique Foxworth Show.